All right, EntreArchitect community, it's 4 p.m. Eastern or thereabouts, which means it's time for the EntreArchitect Context and Clarity live conversation for Thursday, December 1st, 2022. Happy December, everybody. When you get here, say hi. Let us know that you're here and let us know where here is for you. Where are you joining this conversation from? If we've never met before, my name is Jeff. I'm in Indianapolis. I come here every weekday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern for one reason, so that we can find clarity around the things that matter most to you, the architect. It doesn't matter if you're the employee of a firm or you own your own firm. Maybe you circled a date on the calendar. You said, hey, 2022 is my year. And by the end of this year, you have 31 days left to launch your own thing. Or maybe you have owned your own firm for a year or 10 years or 26 years, and you're starting to rethink or reimagine what that firm could or maybe even should be. All of the topics that we cover, one topic every day, they all fall under the broad umbrella of the business of architecture, and they're all the need to know topics for the success of entrepreneur architects just like you. And as usual, on these Context and Clarity live days, I am joined by my co-host, Katharine MacPhail. Hi, Katharine.
Hello, Jeff.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I guess we didn't see each other last week because it was Thanksgiving. But I have a question for you.
Okay.
I've been thinking about how different people have their brains work in different ways, obviously, right? But
yeah.
Someone brought up the other day how there are two ways of thinking about time, just when you were talking about how it's the end of the year and we have this many days left. So either a person can be the kind of person who moves through time, like down the timeline, or you have time going by you. So you might say, I can't wait until New Year's. Like you can't wait until New Year's gets to you. You know what I mean? So which way do you think about time? Like when you're thinking about the beginning of December, how do you visualize that? Or, like in not literally, because I can't literally visualize anything.
I would say that I'm moving through time, I guess.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm moving through time. And I guess it's kind of like a depth thing. So January's at the top and then we go down and down the hill and then get back on the top again.
Okay. All right.
So we're down and down in the valley.
Sledding is on its way. I don't know, for those of you in the Midwest, we're having a real winter already. It's not even winter yet. So yeah, we're going to have sledding. It could be sledding through the year.
Yeah, that's right.
If you really want to mess with that, read Einstein's Dreams.
Oh, you keep telling me that. Maybe I should just go ahead and read that. I'm going to write that down again.
It's not a long read, I don't think, but yeah, it deals a little bit with time. Looking out at our community here, I see, looks like to me that Chris Novelli is the first in the room today. He's joining us from Massachusetts and Facebook. So Chris is the winner of today's John Kinney Memorial Crochet Bathtub Award. Congratulations, Chris. Welcome back. Scott Thrift says it's a rainy, gray day in San Francisco. Well, glad I'm assuming you're inside, but glad you're inside today. Scott, thanks for joining us from San Francisco and LinkedIn. Christian's joining us from Ithaca, New York, and Nicole from Arizona. Kurt is joining us from Flint, Michigan, and he's leading the Twitch parade, the Twitch army over there. Thanks for joining us today, Kurt. Let's see, Chris is traveling down the timeline. And Rod says, if I could keep time in a bottle, I would be Jim Croce's crocheted mustache. And I don't even know what to do with that.
I don't either. Thanks for the earworm, though, Rod.
Yeah.
I'm going to be humming that all through the show today.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, no one's going to be able to unhear that or see it or unexperience that.
Because Jim Croce was like, I went to middle school at a time when Jim Croce's face was on a mural on the wall.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, just want to share that.
All right. Have you been back to that school to see if it's still there?
No, I haven't. But that was the 70s, so probably not still there.
I don't know.
Hopefully they painted.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, we're running slightly late today, and we have our guest back in the green room. We have stocked it. We almost made a really big mistake. We ordered Twizzlers for the green room, And, when I was checking the boxes on the Target order, I checked the black Twizzlers, but it turns out that would not have been a good thing. So we've got
Mm.
a whole bunch of red Twizzlers in the green room for our guest. And they may be running out by now. So we better
Yeah, we haven't
get
let
to
people
it
you're
here.
waiting.
Yeah. Yeah. And Katharine was asking me earlier about some sort of licorice something. I don't know. It's not chocolate. I have zero expertise
Yeah,
in
no,
any non-chocolate candy.
I think I'm more of the candy expert than you. I mean, not to flex or anything, but I think that maybe I'm one with a broader knowledge of candies.
Hey, flex
That's
it if
okay.
you got it. That's a good
All right.
one.
Well, I was talking about a black licorice pipe. Does anybody else remember that? It was like this, like a smoking pipe, but it's
I'm pretty
made
sure
out of
those
black
are
licorice.
illegal in Indiana.
Well, again, the 70s, we used to have a lot of like pretend cigarettes and pipes and stuff they give to kids just to pretend, to get ready for being a grown up.
Yeah, train them up. Train
Right.
them up.
Get your pipe.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
we need a context and clarity time machine. That's what we need.
do. That would be so much fun.
We'll come back with fake cigarettes. Okay, Chris remembers the candy cigarettes, so it's not lost just on us.
The ones that were gum and you blow out, and it was like wrapped, and it would come out in smoke.
Had a little dust or something. Yeah.
Super cool.
All right. Well, before we bring those back, let's talk sustainability and bring our guest into this conversation here. Our guest today is a change maker with over 20 years experience in the AEC space from multiple perspectives, including design, product or materials, and the industry association levels. She's a resiliency and sustainability strategist and the senior director of resilience and climate adaptation at the American Institute of Architects. Melissa Wackerle, welcome to Context and Clarity Live.
Hello. Thanks for having me. It's fun to be here.
It's great to have you
I also
here.
remember candy cigarettes.
Yep.
They were super cool, man.
They really were.
I don't remember the licorice pipe, though, because licorice is disgusting.
You're right, of course.
Unless it's red Twizzlers. Has to be the red kind. Yeah.
What's the difference between is a red Twizzler, is that licorice or is that classified as something else?
I would say it's probably not technically, but
No, I think they just call it red licorice. Yeah, it tastes nothing like black
red licorice, but I think it's not like,
it's not that black licorice flavor that a lot of people object to.
I also enjoy dark chocolate, but I'm not a big sweet person. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. Well, all Jeff knows about is dark chocolate.
Well, everybody that's showing up to talk about sustainability, what we're really going to talk about is sustainably sourced dark chocolate here. So we're going to jump into it.
I think that you can find, as opposed to Twizzlers or Nerd Ropes or other things, are probably not sustainable.
Well, no, there's a lot of plastics in the ocean, and in my mind, all those fall into that category. So
yeah, exactly. They're sweet plastics. Anyway.
Anyway, this has been fun, but Melissa, thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you here. It's been a long time coming. I mean, we're getting close to 3 years of Context and Clarity now, and this is the first time that we have spent an entire week focused specifically on quote unquote sustainability. We've talked about it from different angles and so on and so forth, but it's about time that we really had a focus on, I think, the future of resiliency and sustainability in the built environment. So maybe the place to start, because I know, we can get into some semantic issues and some messaging and things like that. So maybe the place to start is when we talk about, you're a sustainability and resiliency strategist. What's the difference between sustainability, resilience, climate adaptation, green? How do we define these things? Where do we draw lines, or do we draw lines?
Well, I see them as sort of two sides of the same coin. And if I think of sustainability and resilience, I think in terms of climate action. So when we're thinking about the climate crisis and trying to meet this 1.5 degrees Celsius target that's come out of the UN ICC, then we want to both mitigate the climate change that's happening to us. So how can we pull the carbon out of the atmosphere? How can we prevent carbon from being emitted into the atmosphere? In particular, greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases are some of the worst, obviously. I think we all kind of understand that these days. But the other side of that equation is that the climate is already changing, and we see these changes all around us. I mean, we have all kinds of billion-dollar disasters now across the country, increasing every year. More every year seems to be a record-breaking in some way, shape, or form. And so, in addition to mitigating the climate change by embodied and operational carbon reduction, then we also have to adapt and make sure that we can withstand the changes that are coming toward us with sea level rise and wildfires and wind speeds, tornadoes. Every place has its own vulnerabilities, and so we need to design for those as they increase.
Go ahead.
Do you mind if one of the questions that we talked about this morning was, what is carbon exactly? So when we are talking about taking it out of the air or not putting it into the air, is that carbon? Is that
That's a great question. So carbon is really a short term for carbon dioxide.
Okay.
But there's also different levels of greenhouse gases. So you'll hear about greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, but it's also part of our normal atmosphere. So, humans breathe in oxygen, we exhale carbon dioxide. Plants breathe in carbon dioxide and exhale oxygen.
We should be thankful for that one.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
So the carbon piece is also, the actual, I'm not a scientist, so I'm going to do my best, right? But, we also have just the carbon molecule. And so that's more of carbon stored in a material. So when we think about embodied carbon, we think about, let's say we have a wood timber frame construction. And so you have the trees that take in the carbon dioxide, convert that into roots and wood and leaves and all the other things that trees do. There's carbon in all the flora and fauna across the world, including us. We're made of carbon too. So, it's part of the cycle of the planet. So carbon is more the solid form of that material, and carbon dioxide is the gaseous form, I think. Again, I'm not a scientist, so I'm doing my best, but that's kind of the difference. But oftentimes when you go to a conference, like let's say we just got back, AIA just got back, not me personally, but AIA sent a delegation to COP27 UN conference on climate change, and carbon is just kind of a short term for both embodied carbon and carbon dioxide that you'll find in the atmosphere. So it can be kind of nuanced.
Okay. Thank you.
So why is it so important? We're talking about this. Our audience, our community, are by and large are either architects, very large proportion architects, but maybe product reps, material manufacturers, etc. Why is it so important to have this conversation inside the people that affect the built environment here? I mean, what portion of the impact on the climate crisis does the built environment make up?
So in the US, buildings are about 40% of the contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. That's both through operational carbon as well as embodied carbon, or the carbon that we find in the materials of the buildings. In that embodied carbon, though, also, it's not just the materials, it's everything that went into those materials. So it's the extraction of the materials or the processing of them to become something different. So if you have a bauxite mine and you transition that bauxite into aluminum, that takes energy and resources, and then you have to transport that, and that is also part of that embodied carbon equation. So when you're thinking about the embodied carbon impact of a material, you have to really be clear about where you're drawing those boundaries first of all. So if you have a material and you're trying to compare one material to another with, say, an environmental product declaration, well, actually, we don't recommend architects actually compare materials with environmental product declarations. We ask them to use third-party verification to interpret the scientific data that's in those documents. But if you were to, you'd want to make sure that they're calculating those things equivalently. So there are standards in the market to help us do that.
So the 40% makes up I'll obviously way oversimplify it, but it makes up the manufacture, the transportation, the construction, and the building and operation itself.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the U.S., which is where many of our community are located. So when we're thinking about the fact that everything that everybody here is doing, it makes up about 40% of the impact on the climate. It's a pretty darn big percentage.
Big opportunity.
It is a big opportunity. So what's the opportunity at the profession or the industry level? What do we need to be doing at that level? Which obviously AIA is a big part of that. But what do we need to be doing at that level to ensure a more sustainable or resilient future in the built environment?
Well, from AIA's perspective and the work that I do, we create tools and resources for architects to apply in their practice. We also lobby for better policy. We lobby for policy incentives. We we support code development and adoption. We're always looking at how the profession is impacting society. So, our mission is in service to society. And so we want to make sure that the built environment and the buildings that our members are designing can respond to the needs of the society that are in place now. One of those needs is climate action and mitigation and adaptation. But when we think about sustainability, we have to think about it in the true definition, which is really the triple bottom line. And that's defined as people, planet, and prosperity. And you'll hear that in lots of different, formats or terms, but it's really making sure that it's a holistic solution to the problems that we face. And that includes also the social equity side of the equation and making sure that we're building communities for the people that will serve the community's needs and not just the people who are, the clients and the building occupants. It doesn't mean that we don't have to, satisfy those requirements. We still have businesses to run. We recognize that our members have lots of pressure on them. So we want to just create resources that can make holistic, good design approachable. And so we do that in a few different ways from the AIA. I mentioned our advocacy efforts, but really when it comes to the work that I do, I work mostly in our framework for design excellence. And so that's basically a set of principles that will help designers look at their designs holistically and across 10 principles of high performance. And it's not just the performance of what's your energy use intensity of your building, but it's also, how is that affecting the community? How is it providing value to your clients so that they can be profitable? So there's a lot of different criteria there, but it's really thinking about all the ways that buildings can perform, and then giving guidance and resources to help our members achieve that.
Is that for all types of projects or just larger scale projects? Or
it's made for every project scale, every firm size. there's different levels that you can approach it, but at the very basic framework for design excellence level, it's just really the essence of it is a PDF that is a series of questions that you can have with your owner just to start in the design process. Say you're having a design shred, and you can, just explore these topics with your owner. And then basically what you can do then is align the values of the owner with the performance of the project. What we find when we've done client research is that clients want healthier outcomes for their occupants. They want to be, good stewards of the environment. They want low electricity bills. They want a project that will withstand high winds or whatever the changing climate has to offer them. And so it's just a matter of connecting those values to the way the building performs. And really, that's a way to show the value of the architect.
I'm glad to hear that, because so the question we started with yesterday, every day when we have these conversations, we start with a question. And the question yesterday was, how do you, quote unquote, sell sustainability? And that might not be the right way to say it, but when you're talking about aligning those values, I think that's really important. And one of the things, I don't remember who made this comment yesterday, but it boiled down to making all of this understandable, right? We talk about sustainability. What the heck does sustainability mean? And the different nuances, like you said. And but I think you're exactly right when you say, if we're designing this and aligning with our clients' values and needs and all that, that also shows the value that the architect brings to the project, to the built environment, et cetera. That's something that we talk about all the time is, and there was an article, you've probably seen this. I think it was over the weekend. It was an op-ed in the UK where somebody, I don't remember who it was, but just lambasted architects. There's no value to architects, and this, that, and the other. And honestly, I think it's on us all the time to demonstrate the value that we're bringing. So I love the idea that here's a great starting point that we can, a tool that we can use with clients that, oh yeah, by the way, it demonstrates the value that you bring to the process. You mentioned equity, which I think is also an important part of this conversation, because a lot of times, my mind immediately goes to like building science, right? Well, what about the materials? What about, the vapor barrier and things like that? So how does equity come back into this conversation?
So what we find with climate change and the impacts that the deleterious impacts of climate change is that they affect those folks who are most underinvested oftentimes. And so there is a huge climate justice issue when it comes to communities that are located in floodplains, because that's the only land that they can afford. There's intergenerational wealth that's tied to home ownership. And so when they lose those homes, they not only lose their place to live, their domicile, but they also lose the value that comes with that. When people are displaced from their homes, the lower income they are, the longer they're displaced, and the more impact that has on their lives. So that equates to lower income levels, because lack of job advancement or lack of opportunity to access education. So if you are someone who was impacted by Katrina, many of those people are still displaced. Many of them moved permanently to places like Houston and Dallas and, all over the South. Mm-hmm. And so it takes a long time to recover from that kind of disruption to your life. And if you don't have the financial resources in place to absorb that, it can be devastating.
That was another one of the questions about drastic climate change, and is migrating to other areas of the country going to be an issue, and how, as architects, can we help with that whole situation? What can we do before it's too late,
Well, as builders or designers of the built environment, we can always advise our clients not to build in certain places, or, we can run a vulnerability assessment and look at a space and look at a site and say, here's how your site is vulnerable. And we can either adapt to those vulnerabilities, or there may be times where we just need to say, that's not a good place to build. Yeah. We also need to think about, where we're rebuilding places. And that can be very sensitive, because people are culturally connected to their sense of place.
Right.
And so, when you're trying to, think about not building on a place that's been impacted repeatedly, then, it's hard to manage. With architects, though, we can think through where those people are going to go. What are the housing solutions that we're going to provide? How sustainable, how resilient are those places? Are they meeting current building codes? Are they exceeding current building codes? A lot of it is also really protecting asset value. So, when we think of building codes, architects know that the building code is the minimum standard of building a building that's habitable. Those codes are really centered around life safety, ensuring that the building is standing long enough for people to exit and survive. But when you think of that whole equation of health, safety, and welfare, it's more than just safety. And part of that is managing and maintaining the value of that building as an asset. So then you have people who are not displaced, or are displaced for a shorter amount of time, because the building is still standing and it's in a form that people can quickly reoccupy. There's also providing places of respite. So where are the shelters? Where are the places that can't go down? Where can we house people in the event of an evacuation, or if there's a fire? There's a lot of design work that really goes into that. There's also a level of land use planning. And so in the United States in particular, and I moved to DC 9 years ago from Dallas, so it's a lot of sprawl there. So land use is another really big issue, and habitat loss, biodiversity loss. So all of these things are interconnected. And when you think about habitat loss and biodiversity loss, we can really start digging and diving into and integrating nature into the built environment. And there's so many different benefits to infusing nature in the built environment, for human health, for water management, for habitat, for energy savings. They create microclimates where you can be more comfortable on the hottest days of the year, which are getting hotter and hotter. Mm-hmm. Inequity you see. So in these places that have been redlined and disinvested for decades, there's fewer tree canopy or park spaces. And those areas are actually, in some cases, 10 degrees hotter than areas with vegetation. And so that's an inequity issue. And a lot of the places where that's where they're experiencing higher temperatures, they also sometimes don't have air conditioning. And so now where can they go? So again, it's this level of displacement. We can't just say, let's give everyone an air conditioner. That's not sustainable. Right. But where can we have design solutions that can be more passive design strategies, that can have more, natural ventilation, even if it's just in the event of an emergency? I think we can also really think more creatively about design solutions and think about, how we can have more hybrid systems. How can we include more natural ventilation, even in hot, humid climates like Dallas or Houston, so that people can be more comfortable in, our changing environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Chris points out that this morning we were talking about mass migration out of large areas to, we were talking about Vermont. I've decided Vermont might be the perfect place to go, but so everybody should go invest in land in Vermont that we can sell to other people. That's what we could do. But no. So instead of having, this site versus that site situation. Oh, I think we're having dog issues.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I'm glad you're okay.
No,
So,
my dog was just tip-tapping around,
yeah.
and I wanted to stop that noise. I figured it was probably annoying you a little bit.
No, no,
So
it's all fine.
apologies for that.
It's
I just
fine.
closed the door.
Um, I mean, we don't need to get into this, and I don't mean to derail the conversation, but a lot of the people who live in the low-lying areas, like you were saying, are there because it's land that was less expensive, and it kind of ties into the Color of Law book that we're reading this year. And there are a lot of people who live in places that aren't going to fare very well. And how do we help them? Do we raise their houses up? Do we move those people out of those places? How do we maintain their wealth? There's a lot of hard problems that go along with that.
Oh man, I think that's a bigger question that architects can answer on their own.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's going to take rethinking some systems. When FEMA goes in and looks at post-disaster, I'm just going to use an example from Hurricane Ian. So FEMA right now is looking at the effects of mitigation strategies like better building codes in post-disaster events. They're about to go into Ian to assess how buildings performed. And so better understanding how those buildings are performing and looking at that data and responding with design strategies is always a good approach from a designer's perspective. But we also need policies in place that will, instead of saying we're going to pay to rebuild your home, let's really think, can we buy you out of that home? Is there another solution? And it's also really important to ask people what they want.
Yeah.
It's easy for folks to come in and say, I have all the answers, but coming in and saying you have all the answers is not the solution that communities are looking for. They're looking for solutions to their problems. And there are places where people haven't returned to. And that's problematic economically in some of those places. But, I think the best thing we can do as architects and architecture is, design a better world. And so advocate for policies that will support that. There's also a level, if you want to think about what an individual architect can do, there's in addition to their design work or their consulting work, there's lots of different ways that architects practice that are not necessarily designing buildings. But architects can also go in and volunteer on their planning and zoning board or participate in their local council on government and make sure that they can contribute to policy. And really, policymakers want that level of expertise. A lot of the policymakers that we work with at AIA really appreciate the value that architects bring because they have a lens that the policymakers don't have. So when we advise on, or when we can make recommendations on policy to congressional committees and say, hey, we know you have a bill on, we have one that's, it's a bill on resilience in CARS, the National Climate Adaptation and Resilience Strategy Act that's in process right now. And so we just wrote a letter that was built with a coalition, a resilience coalition that we work with at the Institute. We have several signatories. We sent that to the committee and said, we think these are great solutions that you can incorporate into your legislation. And they value that input because they're not the experts on the built environment. They rely on us to help give them those insights and analysis and help guide that kind of policy. And so we try to do our best to support those things. We also support you can support that with code development and advocacy, adoption advocacy. So if you look at many states don't have a statewide code. So architects could, and AIA components or chapters often do, advocate at the state level. But every little bit counts when it comes to that. So, FEMA has a program called BRIC, Building Resilience in Communities, I think. Sorry, those acronyms get you every time. But in order to get the money or get more money from the program, you get more from having a statewide code. So, there's policy incentives for states to adopt codes, and states do and don't for various reasons, but they're always going to listen more to their constituents locally at their state level and the city level than they're ever going to listen to a national organization coming and getting in their business.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I don't know about every state, but where I am in Indiana, there's a lot of advocacy happening at the local level, which, here we are, it's the United States, and we seem to be back to arguing states' rights all of a sudden. But, the things that happen at the local level often have as much or more impact on your projects than anything and that's not a knock on AI National at all, but what's happening here is legislated by the State House, which is just right over there. And because of my perspective, here in Indiana, which is I haven't seen any other names from Indiana, but a sometimes backwards state in some of our opinions. What happens when you run into people that just don't care? We all know that money drives a lot of things. So what happens when you have a client that says, we don't have the money to do sustainable things or sustainable materials, or you have a developer that says, hey, all these things that you're talking about are great, but that's not in our performa. Do you have any advice for what to do in those instances where somebody is we're not preaching to the choir anymore, they're not drinking the Kool-Aid, they either don't care or they're against it?
Well, I spent 30 years in Texas. Yeah. So I understand that perspective. I'm from rural Missouri. I understand that perspective too. And again, it just goes back to what we started with. What's the value proposition? So when you have post disasters like Ian, for example, we can point to the building code and say the buildings that were designed before hurricane codes were improved after Hurricane Andrew failed disastrously.
Yep.
The buildings that were built after the codes were improved after the impact of Andrew have performed better. They're not destroyed. It's not as devastating. And so that's where you can point to it's the value proposition. And that's where also federal policy and incentives can help. There's a new program that's building performance standards and making sure that we can have a shared set of standards that we can apply across communities around the country. And so I think that started with 33 communities looking at building performance standards. And, you can't manage what you don't measure. So the connection is really, where do you find your value? And if that value is that you want to maintain the asset that is your building, that you want to make sure that building is going to perform in the event of a power outage, or if it's going to survive a tornado or hurricane force winds or a wildfire, then, codes don't necessarily do all of those things, but design can do many of those things. And I think one of the things that I find a bit of a fallacy in the question is that it costs more. And really good design does not have to cost more if you can be really thoughtful, especially early on. You can reduce system sizes by applying passive design strategies like daylighting or ventilation where it's most appropriate. Again, responding to the climate that you're designing in is critical. But thinking holistically about the building and making sure that you're applying these solutions across the board. VMDO Architects out of Charlottesville, Virginia, delivers net zero energy schools at the same price as they would a non-net zero energy school. They're following the same design brief that others would have as well. And they're saying we can meet this design brief and beyond with good, thoughtful design. And their buildings win awards. They win AIA awards. So, and the clients see the value because now they have lower electricity bills.
I think that communication, to me, a lot of this comes down to communication. It's how do we communicate the value? How do we communicate these things? And, those examples really resonate with me because back when I did design, I told the story yesterday. We had a client that, it's a large home for a family that on many levels there's nothing quote unquote sustainable about this, right? It's just a big multi-million-dollar home that they're paying cash for. That story pops up all the time. But what they were concerned about, and they didn't care about sustainability, right? Oh, what about Well, we don't care about any of that. But what they did care about was the operating expense of the home, because this is what they're going to pay month over month over month. And now suddenly, right, we've got the best materials, we've got the best technology, we've got all of these things, and it's, again, on some level, probably on every level, it's a much more sustainable home than it would have been, still falling far short of a lot of our metrics. But communicating, hey, and I don't know, do we with certain clients, do we not use certain terms in favor of other terms? Maybe. I think it's communication. How do we probably sell sustainability? Might not be the right way to say it, but how do we sell sustainability to everyone? It's going to be a different conversation everywhere, I think.
Yeah, you have to meet people where they are. You can't just come in and
point.
say, I know everything and I have all the answers for you and I'm going to tell you what's important. Like that's not ever a successful sales strategy. I'm not a salesperson, but
it's so tempting though, because it's so frustrating that you have to use certain words with people so they don't get too excited about like the whole. Anyway, I'm just not even going to go into the whole climate. We used to all be working toward fixing this problem until certain people decided they were. I just don't understand why those certain people can't invest in sustainable energy and then let us all try to work toward.
What blows my mind is the billions of dollars that are put in political ads that could be better spent in actual programs.
Yeah. and the misinformation that's being spread about climate change or not being suppressed about climate change. I don't understand that, really. Anyway.
I feel like most people these days have a sense that the science is the science. It is the facts. Sometimes we're just not, if you are vehemently, taking the position that the world is flat, I don't know that I can give you any level of science that is going to help you believe that the world is not flat. We have pictures from space of our beautiful planet, right?
It looks flat though. It's just a circle.
So, but sometimes people are just not going to believe things, but, not like, I don't think that that's the vast majority of people. That's a small percentage of people. And, the ones that understand that the science is real, and many architects, in my experience, they have a lot of conflicts with their time. They have a lot of activities. They have a lot of things to do. And so we don't necessarily want to say this is one more thing, right? It's just, we want to integrate it with all of design, which is what we're trying to do with the framework for design excellence. I'd also like to point out, that it's not, it's neutral when it comes to firm size. So a lot of firms think, oh, that's a big firm thing. Only big firms that can afford to have like research divisions, like Perkins and Will's transparency site, those sorts of things. It's amazing. And the fact that they give that to the profession is incredible. But what also happens is a lot of times small and medium-sized firms are the most innovative. So I'm thinking firms like Helmuth Bickness Architects out of St. Louis, and Kipnis Architecture and Planning in Chicago area, Evanston, or Unabridged Architecture in Mississippi. These firms are like under 10, under 5 people, and they do amazing work. And what happens is sometimes large firms look at those innovation incubators. Thanks for putting that link in. Those innovation incubators, and adopt their practices because they see the value there. So it is really something that every firm can do if they just integrate high performance into their design.
Well, you mentioned meeting people where they are, right? And if we took the attitude that it's only a Perkins and Will size firm, or in any of the 3-letter firms out there, then Perkins and Will is not generally meeting people where they live. Now they may be meeting people where they study. They may be meeting people where they work and things like that. But I think when we come down to the individual firm level, large or small, as you said, there's I'm guessing at this, but there's probably more impact possible at the small firm residential firm level than designing university buildings or something like that. So it's I think it's important, like you said. I think it's important for all of us to consider these things. Mike Maines, I see him in the comments here. He's one of the co-authors of the recently released Pretty Good House book, which I think does a fantastic job of helping people understand what all of this means, and how your home can be designed in, dare I say, sustainable ways, using sustainable methods.
Yeah.
So the Perkins and Will link up on the screen. Here's sorry to interrupt there. Here's another link for those of you that are watching us live or watching the video on the replay. You can also use this link that I'm about to post from AIA National.
So you're posting that. So that was one of the questions, Melissa. Have you heard of the Pretty Good House book?
I have not. I have not heard of the Pretty Good House book. I'm sorry to say.
Or not even the book, but just the movement, the Pretty Good House movement. I mean, I think we were talking this morning about how that is a way to, their mission, I think, is to educate the public in a way that they can understand, and also architects. So anyway, just put that on your reading list, maybe.
I will. Thanks for
let that link up momentarily. So right now so tell me about this link, Melissa. It's the AIA site resources. It's the framework for design excellence. It was just about elegance, but excellence.
That's the tool that I had mentioned to you guys, that is really that kind of intersection for the holistic high performance design. It was adopted from the Committee on the Environment's Top 10 Award Program. We have 25 years of projects that have been more than 25 years have been submitted through the COTE Top 10. It was always intended to be, temporary. And so in 2019, AIA adopted the COTE Top 10 Award Program as the framework for design excellence. And so the link I sent has kind of an overview of the program. It has a download of the PDF that are those guiding questions, as well as individual pages for each principle that talks about, some of the strategies that you can use. If you could only do one or just a few things, what are the highest impact items that you could do in that principle? if you wanted to find what best practices are out there, if you wanted to look for resources, and we have resources, we provide both AIA resources where we have them, but we also connect to other outside industry resources. So, for Design for Change, for example, we can point people to the National Climate Assessment so they can understand what the risks are to their projects. So there's all these different tools, and then each of those tabs, tiles on that page also has case studies that are associated with it. So every one of those is just kind of a little, hey, I want to know more about this. I want to implement this in practice. Another thing, we talked a lot about the communicating to the client, and another great resource that we have on that, I'm just going to pull it up really quickly for a link, is this ROI of high performance design. And so this is some information on how you might talk to clients about the benefits of high performance design. And we talk about materials, we talk about resilience, and we have one working on equity that's coming soon. We have information on embodied carbon and asset value. So there's a lot of, and those are all basically built from literature reviews. So we worked and looked at what the research literature is saying about this. And so all of these studies that we cited have been vetted and peer reviewed. So it's solid research and data that you can share with your clients or use just to kind of bone up on your own expertise.
Yeah, that's great. And so, it's important to know that those resources are out there. And, if you've ever struggled to say, how do I convince somebody, or how do I prove that there is an ROI to whatever this is that we're talking about? Here's a great resource for that. Somebody asked earlier to post the link for Pretty Good House. It's prettygoodhouse.org. We'll pop that up here again in a couple of minutes after you've had a chance to take down this ROI of high performance design link. But also just announced is that we're doing a Pretty Good House workshop December 13th through 16th. So look for that in the EntreArchitect community Facebook group for more info on that. I know everybody is really looking for the resources to not only to learn, but also to be able to educate, which I think that's an important aspect of all of this. Educate ourselves, certainly, but educate the public about all of this. It's important.
Yeah, it's really important to drive that demand. We want to make sure that people can understand the potential of the built environment. When it comes to climate action in particular, I think people just don't understand the impact of the built environment, but also the potential of the built environment to, help solve some of these problems. So it's all opportunity, but there's also a great sense of urgency. And so that's why AIA has so many programs in place to support our members in implementing these things. A couple of pieces that I think are worth mentioning that I don't want to go away without talking about is, some of our programs for really measuring progress. So I think someone in the chat earlier mentioned a spreadsheet for the Framework for Design Excellence. We do have a really robust spreadsheet that can track multiple metrics for the framework that was built out of the Code Top 10 Award program. It's a very advanced tool. We also have more simplified tools like the PDF sheet that I shared for download with the guiding questions. But we also have tools for firms to measure their progress, and that's really, and most importantly, the 2030 commitment. So how can your firm really look across your portfolio, whether that's 5 projects or 500 projects, to understand the impact it's having? And then that's also something that you can communicate to your client. You can say, we are involved in this program and we've contributed to climate action solutions. And you can measure that through the Design Data Exchange, which is a tool we have to measure. Currently, we measure operational energy use intensity or operational carbon emissions, as well as embodied carbon and metrics as well. So, there's a lot of great ways for firms and individual architects to engage in creating a better built environment.
Yeah. That's one of the things that's come up several times this week, that because my focus is a lot on marketing and branding and those types of things. A lot of people have talked about the fact that they talk about what they believe in. They talk about what they focus on. They've started to be known as the architect that does these types of projects. We need more of that. That is, I said this yesterday, but that is firmly in the brand building process. When you become known as the firm that focuses on that, that's the brand that you're building. We need more of that at the firm level, as well as certainly at the profession level. Hey, architects are the people that are focusing on this, and I'm glad that these tools are out here, because it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to prove it, and that's really what we need to have going on. And, you mentioned, Melissa, the code changes that came after Hurricane Andrew, and as you were telling that story, right, the buildings that survived and the buildings that didn't. That's horrific, but also really useful, I think, because I can totally visualize that. Do you see after Ian, again, very impactful. Do you see more big changes coming on the heels of, I guess, specifically Ian? And as you said, there's more and more happening all the time. But do you see more coming on the heels of some of these most recent storms and fires and the events of 2022?
Absolutely. There's organizations out there responding already. FEMA is doing the mitigation assessment team. They're going to be sending people out to evaluate the progress. We also have entities like the Insurance Institute for Building and Home Safety that has this really advanced facility for understanding hazards on buildings. They're really starting to dig into wildfires. It's also making sure that we don't just say that these things are coastal. So when you look at what happened across the Midwest and Tennessee and Kentucky last year with those horrific tornadoes, the same kinds of code improvements can help those buildings that have the high wind tornado impacts as the hurricane wind impacts. So where can we apply some of those best practices, but also better understand, how buildings are responding to these things? When it comes to wildfire, there's, some simple strategies that are already kind of out there. The Insurance Institute for Building and Home Safety is studying wildfire right now. They have guidelines for wildfire, things like defensible spaces and the types of materials you're building with. And defensible spaces are actually areas around the building where you have limited vegetation, so that you don't have plants right up against the house that are going to burn, but you can still design a beautiful landscape around that. So it's just a matter of thinking about design in ways that are going to be responsive to our current environment, but also the future environment that we're facing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Future. That's really what we're talking about, right? It's future. How are we adapting? I know I just realized I'm watching the clock here and watching the clock here. Hey, we started a little bit late, so we've gone a little bit long here. But as we wrap up this conversation, which has been, just chock full of great information here, what advice do you have for architects, at the practice level? We've got a lot of sole practitioners. Majority of our community are smaller firms. What advice do you have at the practice level for a firm? What do you need to be thinking about 2022 and beyond to build your practice, but probably more importantly, to serve your clients?
Well, it's really about, seeing the challenges that we have ahead of us as potential, as opportunity. In the time that I've been at AIA, there's been a lot of discussion about the relevance of architects and the relevance of the profession. And I can't think of another time that the profession has been more relevant. If we can just step up to the challenges and show the power of design, to show what design can do. There are resources that we offer to help that business case, the ROI piece that I shared. We also have a brand new guide on the Climate Action Business Playbook is a new guide that we just put out in the last few weeks. We have a resource, the Architect's Guide to Business Continuity, to help firms plan those disruptions that might happen to their actual practice. When they had the Harvey floods in Houston, 2 years ago now, 3 years ago, many firms were flooded. And a lot of those architects went to other firms and had desks at those firms. And so, it's possible that your practice will be impacted by some climate hazard or some disaster. And so what is your plan to continue practicing? Because in those disasters is when we need architects to recover from them. And so if your business is not solid, if you don't have an office, or if you don't have a network, or if you don't have a phone system, or whatever is missing, how are you going to respond by your practice? So there's a lot of business aspects of this too.
That's a great point. It's an interesting point. Yeah. Probably one that we don't think about that much.
It's not fun to think about those things. It's not fun to think, what's going to happen if my office is under 3 feet of water for a week?
Right.
It's a challenge. And architects are busy people. We're all busy people. There's so many challenges to day-to-day practice. It's hard to set aside the time to sign the 2030 commitment, or create a sustainability action plan, or create a business continuity plan. Less than 50% of firms, in some research we did in the last year, said they have business continuity plans. So that's half of the profession that, is not prepared in that case, but we want them to be. And so, we create the resources that can support that. So, one of the things I can say is check AIA's website. If there's something you want to try, if there's something you want to do, we have a lot of resources that, a lot of our members say, I didn't even know you had that. And we want to solve that problem in many ways. We're working on that. We're working on better communication of the value of AIA and the value of our programs and the value of the framework for design excellence and its goals of a healthy, equitable, resilient, zero carbon built environment. So we are here to help. And, that's why you're a member.
Yeah.
We appreciate all the work that architects do. Yeah. And the contributions to the Institute, let me say that, because everything that we do is driven by our members, and they're so generous and kind and passionate. And I appreciate that so much.
Well, we thank you for all of these resources that you've shared. And for anybody out there, if you're listening to this later, or you're watching this later, or you've been along for the ride this whole time, we thank you for being here in person. But go check out the resources tab at aia.org. Melissa shared several links here for us, and I know some of you have picked those up and posted them in the comments, which is very helpful. Thank you for that. But if you need more, just go to aia.org and find the resources tab at the top, click on it, and you're going to find, if you do that, you're going to find a lot of resources, not just around sustainability, but a lot of things. So Melissa, thank you for this conversation. Really appreciate everything that you shared, and everything from the mindsets to the technical to the ROI and everything else. It's there's a lot there, and we thank you for the work that you're doing there.
It's been delightful. Thanks so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, great. Thank you. And, we're going to send you some more Twizzlers We'll send it to you for Christmas. Looking ahead, number one, Katharine mentioned this earlier, and many of the things that Melissa touched on are related in some way to the book, The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein. That's been our November Context and Clarity book club book of the month. Obviously, last week was the Friday of last week was the last Friday of November, but the day after Thanksgiving. So we pushed that discussion back until tomorrow. So we're going to host that tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern. We're going to talk about your takeaways from The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein. So join us for that tomorrow. Now, looking ahead to next week on Context and Clarity Live, our guest will be Jamie Claire Kaiser. She is the head of mergers and all things mergers and acquisitions at the Zweig Group. So many of you are thinking about succession plans and growth and different ways that mergers and acquisitions can affect you, your firm, your livelihood, your future, et cetera. So as usual, I will post Saturday morning about, hey, we're going to talk to Jamie next week. What do you want to talk about? So you let me know, what topics do you want to touch on next week. Until then, again, thank you to Melissa. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to Katharine, of course. If it weren't for all of you and making context and clarity a thing, we wouldn't be having this conversation, which has been a very important conversation. So thanks to all of you for this. Until then, please take care of yourselves. Be well. Stay safe. Keep those around you safe and well. Take a little bit of time to breathe. Relax. Find a way to rejuvenate. We do this every day, so you've got to pace yourself. Thanks for going along this journey with us, and we'll see you next time, everybody. Thanks.
Peace.